what's the backstory to Justin Tucker's suspension? We all know what was up with Justin Tucker, but where did the 10-gamer land, and what's your knowledge of this situation, Tom?
So my understanding is the NFL had done their usual process here with Justin Tucker, these allegations of sexual misconduct raised by a number of masseuses in the Baltimore area from the early stages of his career. This is 9 years ago or so. The NFL and Lisa Friel and her team had investigated this. They had interviewed at least some of the women. They had interviewed Justin Tucker himself. Justin Tucker, from what I've told, let's make this abundantly clear here, Rich. He maintains his innocence. Everybody's going to cast their own judgment based on the circumstances. Accepting the suspension was not him admitting any fault. The reality is with Justin Tucker, he is a 35-year-old going on 36-year-old kicker, one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time, most accurate of all time. But he's coming off the worst season of his career. Even setting aside these allegations, he would have had something to prove in 2025. And there would have been a possibility that the Ravens would have been doing what they did in drafting a kicker and casting an eye to the future, just because that's the nature of the NFL. If Justin Tucker had allowed this to go the rest of the way in the process and had a judgment, you remember back in the Deshaun Watson case, it was Sue Robinson, the former federal judge, had the initial ruling, and then the NFL appealed that, and it ended up being a settlement that was 11 games at that time later on in the year, but that took a while. Justin Tucker, it was going to be very difficult for another team to sign Justin Tucker not knowing, is he facing a multi-year suspension? Is he indefinitely banished? Like, what's the situation? For Justin Tucker to have a chance to play again in the NFL, Rich, his best option was going to be accepting a suspension that was slightly under Deshaun Watson. It's 10 weeks, not 10 games, because we don't know what team or when the bye would be for Justin Tucker. So he'll be out the first 10 weeks of the 2025 season. Then he would have the opportunity around Thanksgiving to come back and kick again. In addition to that, you also avoid what we had in the Watson case, which was hundreds of pages of documents and testimony and evidence becoming public that I still think, setting aside the fact that Deshaun Watson has not played much, and when he has not played very well for the Browns, but those are things that will forever stick with him. With Justin Tucker, you have certainly disturbing allegations that have been raised by the masseuses in this case, but you don't have a lengthy document outlining the decision and all these additional things. This allows him to say, I'm accepting the suspension. I'm going to have my shot at redemption, which for him is going to be coming back, answering questions probably from reporters when he returns. And then ultimately he hopes returning to the field. The best case scenario for him, and I know that he consulted his attorneys, he consulted the NFLPA, they could have dragged it out. That could have been a year or two before things get resolved. It could have ended up in the legal system. He accepted the suspension right now to start the clock and to give himself the opportunity that come November and December, we all know, Rich, there are not enough good kickers in the NFL. We'll see how it plays out, but I would not be surprised at all if somebody, if they're in a bind, is sitting there and going, all right,
Wow.
let's bring in the most accurate field goal kicker of all time, take the criticism as it is, and get somebody that we believe can stabilize that position for a play.
I mean, there may not be a court document, but there's tons of reporting on this, certainly in the local Baltimore area, on what Justin Tucker was accused of doing, and the sordidness and disgusting nature of the accusations would certainly call into question anybody that might move in his direction without some sort of accounting for the veracity of all this, to be straight up, Tom. And, it's interesting that, again, I saw his representation said this is in no way any admission of guilt, although he cannot appeal it. Like, this thing is,
It's agreed not to. Right. It was negotiated, a negotiated
right. Which means the league is like, you're going to take this and don't even make us come and explain why we're doing this. Again, I guess that's 10 weeks into the season. We shall see. But
think about it this way, though, Rich. If he misses a whole season, let's say between the length of the process
right.
to yield a verdict, then a potential appeal. Let's say the suspension doesn't come down until November, December. Now he's missing a whole year, or if they suspend him before the season for a whole year or more, because clearly if they settled on 10 games, the NFL was seeking substantially more than that. I would anticipate the NFLPA was probably seeking a fine. That's generally how these things go. If you get a year out and then there's potential even suspension into the following year, again, we're talking about a 35, 36-year-old kicker. Rich, he had to make a decision here. Again, people are going to draw their conclusions based on the reporting. That reporting also was out in January. If you got a fresh document after a suspension decision in September, October, November that brings all this back to the consciousness, that probably has even more detail and disturbing allegations, it's a decision he had to make. Certainly, from everything I understand, he maintains his innocence. He would have liked to state that in a strong way. But the further you get into this, the reality is, Rich, the standard in the collective bargaining agreement, the personal conduct policy, allows some latitude here. This is not a court of law. This is not
Right.
beyond a reasonable doubt. This is, we believe that a violation occurred here. There was far more risk for him in allowing this process to go to a decision and then potentially weighing legal action than there was in doing what he did yesterday, which is accepting the 10-week suspension and hoping that somebody gives him an opportunity both on and off the field for redemption that others, including, the likes of his former teammate Ray Rice, never got because he never got back into the NFL.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show live weekdays from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern on Roku Sports Channel in the U.S.